Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening if you are in Italy. My name is Giuseppe Gazzola, and I am the acting director of the Center for Italian Studies at Stony Brook. My job here is simply to welcome Riccardo Illy in his virtual visit to our university, hoping that he will be able to visit in person soon as it will be possible. And to thank the D'Amato Chair, the Professor Loredana Polezzi, for hosting the Richard Nasty Lecture of Spring 2022 in her course on Italian American Studies. Loredana, please.
Okay. Well, once again, it is a pleasure to be able to have Riccardo Illy here with us. And of course, we would very much love to have him here in person, but he is speaking to us from Trieste, from his hometown. And that is also a pleasure, knowing that we're speaking to a Triestino, which is one of the first things that I think of when I think of Mr. Illy, from his hometown. Riccardo Illy proverbially needs no introduction, but proverbially and normally we will introduce him anyway. He is at present the chairman of the Polo del Gusto, which is part of the Illy group, and holds a number of companies which produce some of the best things in the world, because some of the best chocolate, some of the best wine, some of the best confectionaries of tea must simply count as some of the best things in the world. Before that, he was for a long time, he joined Illy Cafe, the coffee side of the company of the Illy group, in the 1970s. In the late 1970s, he became its CEO in 1992. But again, as an Italian, I also think of Mr. Illy very much as a citizen and a denizen of his town, of his city, and of Italy as a nation, and of Europe, I have to say. In the 1990s and the 2000s in particular, he held a number of elected positions. He was the mayor of the city of Trieste, starting in 2001. And again, from my own experience, from my own memory as an Italian citizen, he was among a small number, a handful at most, of people who transformed the role of being a mayor in Italy in these years, and beyond Trieste as well. He was then a member of the Italian Parliament, president of the region, of the Friuli Venezia Giulia region, which is, as he reminds us in his book, is one of the regioni a statuto autonomo, one of the ones that have greater independence and autonomy within the Italian system. And he's also held a number of positions at European level. We are very lucky to have him here today. I'm very glad. He lectures very often in business schools, and also he is the academic director of Italian Innovation, which organizes research and lectures and education. And he recently wrote a book, and I had to ask him because as a translation specialist, I was looking for the name of a translator. But this book is not the translation. This is the text that was written by Mr. Illy directly in English, and it's The Art of Excellent Products, Enchanting Customers with Premium Brand Experiences. It's a book that is about excellent products. It's also about how these products are part of the way in which we create the cultural experience and the cultural image of a nation as well as of a company. And today he is going to speak to us about the book and about the themes that are very dear to him. There is so much about his own experience that is in this book, and so many stories that can surprise us. And surprise is one of the key words that he uses, that Mr. Illy uses in the book. Before I let Mr. Illy speak to us, just a little bit of etiquette. And Antonio, I think we've somehow moved from the view that we want, which is the speaker's view. I'm now instead seeing participants, but I don't know if we can do anything about it. We would ask you please we have muted you, but we would ask you to stay muted, and please to also turn your camera off so that we don't overcharge the system. whilst while Mr. Illy is speaking. And we ask you also in terms of etiquette, please to not interrupt him. However, Mr. Illy has kindly agreed to have a Q&A session at the end of the lecture. And so please write your questions in the chat. We will moderate them. And you can also tell me if you would like to ask the question yourself, we can give you the floor. We can ask you to, we can unmute you and ask you to actually ask your question in person to Mr. Illy. Otherwise, please say so, and I will read your question for you. I think that is all the etiquette that I need to go through. We will, at the end, also give you a link where, if you want, I'm sure many of you will want to, you can buy the book, so you can continue to read at home. So please, as I give the floor to Mr. Illy, can I ask you, if you haven't, to turn your camera off, as well as turning your mic off. Okay, and Mr. Illy, over to you. Oh, but you muted. You need to unmute.
Thank you so much for
Perfect.
your
Thank you.
very kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm talking exactly from Prosecco, which is a small part of the city of Trieste. It's a village, allowing to save the name of the wonderful wine, which is Prosecco. So thank you so much for inviting me. I will use some slides, and I will start exactly with the slide of the book, of course, but immediately after the one of the city of Trieste.
Yep, excellent. We can see the slide.
So here you see the city of Trieste in a very nice picture. In the first part of the picture below, you see the city, the port. Then at the right, slightly upper, you see the castle of Miramare that was built by the Habsburgs. And then later on, the castle of Duino, which is quite older, and then the mountains. So it's a city with the sea, on the sea, but with the mountains very close. So I have some friend of mine, I never had this opportunity, but sometimes in the winter, like now, just call each other and they say, let's go skiing. In 1.5 hours, they arrive in the ski slope and they start skiing. So this is part of the wonder of the city of Trieste, the natural beauty from the sea to the plateau called the Karst, to the nice mountains that are very close. And then I show you where I stayed for about 15 years on the three parts of this square called the Piazza dell'Unità d'Italia, which is the biggest square on the sea. In the back of the photograph, there is the sea. And in front, you have the city hall. There I stayed for about 8 years, always as an independent. I never belonged to a party. At the left, you have the building of the government. So let's say I was there during the 2 years when I was member of the parliament. And at the right, you have the building of the region, where I stayed for about 5 years when I was the governor of the region, Friuli Venezia Giulia. But this is the very center of the city. That has a lot of beauties, architectural, artists, archaeological, because Trieste is a pre-Roman city. We have a wonderful Roman theater that had about 5,000 seats. And this means that the city during the Roman Empire had about 50,000 inhabitants, because the Romans always built the theater with a ratio of 1 to 10 with the population. So it was a quite important city in the Roman Empire. Then during the medieval, it almost disappeared. It became a small fisherman village. then became again important during another empire, the Austro-Hungarian. So Trieste was for about 5 centuries part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the port of Trieste was supplying all the goods arriving to Vienna and to the rest of the empire from further countries. Also, the coffee was arriving here because Vienna was one of the 3 cities where the coffee consumption started in the 18th century, with Venice and Paris. So these were the 3 cities. This was the reason because my grandfather, Francesco, who was born in Temesvar, at that time it was Hungary, he was born in 1892, but after the First World War, that the Austro-Hungarian Empire lost, this city became Romania. And my grandfather didn't want it to become Romanian. He decided first to go to Vienna for some years and then came to Trieste in the years 30. And by the way, he stayed as a stateless person up to 1947. So from the end of the First World War to the end of the Second World War, he was stateless. I don't know how he could live and travel being a stateless person, but he did. And finally, he became an Italian citizen. In 1933, he founded Illy Cafe, that was producing coffee and chocolate at the very beginning, and that had 2 partners, my grandfather, Francesco, and the Hausmann family. And it was, nowadays we would say, a joint venture, 50-50. But the Hausmann family also ran a roasting company, and their company was founded in the same year in which my grandfather was born, so in 1892. And so the Hausmann family told my grandfather, you have the whole world to sell your coffee, except Trieste. We don't want to be competitors in our city. So my grandfather had to invent a system, we call it pressurization, and we still use it, to protect the coffee, to conserve. At that time, the coffee was sold green and often roasted at home, or already roasted, but in paper bags. So there were no protection. After a few days, the coffee was stale. So you bought it almost like the bread, not every day, but maybe every 3, 4, 5 days. So my grandfather invented the pressurization to protect the coffee, a new packaging, and started selling in the whole Italy. In 1939, he founded Illy Cafe Switzerland with a local partner that had the majority, and both Illy and Hausmann had a minority stake. And of course, to get back the bigger costs of packaging and of delivering, my grandfather had a sole solution to deliver such a quality that allowed him to ask a higher price. And so he promoted the growth of his company. He died in 1956, so my father took over. And only some year later, in 1965, he was able to get a majority of Illy Cafe in Trieste, selling his participation of Illy Cafe Switzerland to the Hausmann family. And he also started producing tea. I entered the company in 1977, and soon I changed something in the strategy. I decided to keep only one blend. So we are now the sole roasting company worldwide producing just one blend, even if the company grew since the year 70s about 20 times up till now. And a few years later, because I wanted Illy to be an important brand in coffee, I decided to get rid of tea because it risked to bring some confusion, to dilute the importance of the plant. So for us, quality was always vital. My grandfather wouldn't be able to roast and sell coffee without a clear objective of producing the best quality coffee in the world. So what is quality? That's my first question. I organized for Italy Innovation 3 times summer school and a winter program. I was asked by Marco Mari and Carlotta Borruto, the 2 young guys that run this summer school and winter program. So I designed and organized and taught the summer school about disruptive quality. So I developed this topic, and Marco and Carlotta, after the second summer school, suggested me, why don't you write a book? I already wrote some books in Italian. One I remember well, it was From Coffee to the Espresso. That was written in Italian, but also translated in English. Then I wrote other books only in Italian, like La Rana Cinese, the Chinese frog. And so I thought it's a good idea, but why should I write in Italian a book that is telling the Italian story? So it doesn't matter. So I decided to do it in English, and we found an agent and then a publisher, and I found a lady that helped me in perfecting the quality of the writing. And so the book was published a few days ago, February 22. So let's see what does it mean quality. But first, I start from the hierarchy of needs that Professor Maslow designed some year ago, but which is still absolutely actual. At the bottom, you see the physiological needs. Then you have safety needs. Then love, belonging needs, esteem, which is important. And finally, self-actualization. And the rule of these needs is that only when you satisfy the lower level, you can have access to the higher level needs. So nowadays, probably it's not anymore a pyramid. Probably the higher part is larger than drawn in this design. But the rule is still viable. And I will connect this to the concept of quality. Then talking about quality, you have heard for sure about Edward Deming. He was American, but he developed the concept of total quality in Japan. And then it has been reimported in the States and in Europe and everywhere. So Edward Deming was really an important person talking about quality. And let's say in few words, his concept was that quality is the absence of defects, which is good, but let's say not sufficient to deal with the idea of quality I have and we develop in our companies. So another professor that talked about quality was Theodore Levitt. And his book, Marketing Imagination, I read it many years ago, and I still remember the thoughts by Professor Levitt. But the idea he gave of quality is really interesting. He said, you have at least 3 levels of qualities. One is the necessary one. So the one that is really needed. If you go below, the consumer won't accept the product or the service. Then you have the required quality level or expected quality level. So the one that the people is really expecting. You go to McDonald's, you ask for Mac something, burger sandwich, and you expect this kind of quality and you will get it for sure. At a superior level, you have augmented quality. So a level of quality that is going to surprise you. You may be just expected a sandwich, and you find a sandwich with smoked salmon, to say. You wouldn't expect it. It will surprise you. And this is the highest level of quality. Here you see them represented in terms of products. So in the core, the generic product with the necessary quality. After that, you have the expected quality or required quality. Externally, the augmented product that is represented by the augmented quality. And later, in the peripheral area, you have the potential product that says that you always have the possibility to further improve the quality, and so you also have a potential quality. Now let's connect the needs with the level of quality. So the primary needs, if you are hungry, you just will accept the necessary quality. You won't eat a sandwich with some meat which is rotten, of course, because you would be sick, but will accept the necessary level of quality. When you go at the upper level to social need, you probably will ask for the required quality, to the expected quality. So a higher level. When you are at the top of the pyramid, achievement or self-actualization, you probably aim at augmented quality. So you are curious, you are looking for something new, something better, something really special. I also created this matrix. You probably know the BCG, the Boston Consulting Group matrix, that also uses animals, the dog and the cash cow and so on. So that's the reason I also used some animals. Which are the two elements of the matrix? So one is the kind of innovation. You can innovate through a technology. Think to the first cell phone and think to the present smartphone. Now you can do almost everything with your smartphone. At the very beginning, you could only make a phone call. Now you can even make a movie, pictures, whatever you want, communicate in all the needs. So this represents the technological innovation. But you can also innovate in terms of quality. We can make the example of a woolen pullover. It can be just in normal wool, and probably it won't be so soft. It can be made with a higher quality that is produced only in Asia, and so the quality will augment, and you are able through the use of the different wool to increase the quality of your pullover. So if you use cashmere, for sure you will reach the maximum level, and so you are innovating through the quality. But on the other dimension, you can see you can innovate in an incremental way or in a disruptive. In the incremental, for example, to take again the example of the smartphone, they added one at a time new features, but these were features already existing. The camera already existed. They just put it in the cell phone, in the smartphone. But there are also disruptive technological innovation. Not that many recently, because they almost invented everything up till now. But I give you an example. The LED bulbs are a technological innovation quite recent. And by the way, they save about 80% of the energy. So you can produce light with only 20% of the energy normally used previously. So the same can happen in the qualitative innovation, can be incremental or disruptive. I focused on the quarter at the right in high, so which is the disruptive quality. The animal I use is a cheetah, whereas for the disruptive technology I used a frog, which changes its status. The small frog born as a fish and then become an animal breathing with a lung. So it's an amphibious. And for the incremental technology, I used the sloth, and for the incremental quality, I used the peacock. But this is just a joke. So I called, because disruptive quality is not such a nice name, so we found another name which is much better, which is Encanto, an Italian name that we use to say when something is really marvelous, something really huge, wonderful, we say, well, that's in Encanto, it's wonderful, enchanting. So I will talk about Encanto. Encanto is based on 4 pillars. So you need at least 4 elements to produce Encanto quality. First of all, the perception of superior quality should be detected also by non-professional. So if you organize a panel just of consumers, normal consumers, and you give them some samples, blind samples, they don't know what they are tasting, the Encanto quality product should be detected at least by the majority of the consumer. Then you use the best raw material existing on the market. I will give you the example of Domori, the chocolate company of our group, that was founded in 1997 by Gianluca Franzoni. He is the chairman of the company and he is a minority shareholder. He became aware that the best species of cocoa, called the Criollo, was going to extinction. And he decided to save this species because the quality of this species is really the top, the best you can ever imagine. So now Domori has 2 plantations, one in Venezuela and the second in Ecuador, and we are among the biggest producer of Criollo cacao that we process in a different and incompatible way compared to the, let's say, mass market producer. So whereas the mass producer has 3 steps in the production after roasting the beans. One is grinding, then refining, and then conching. Conching, you mix for hours and hours, up to 72 hours, the chocolate still liquid to get it homogeneous, but also to get rid of the off flavors, the defective flavors contained in the most diffused cacao called Forastero, 90% of the global production. So instead of the 3 steps, Domori uses just one. With sphere mills or ball mills, we make the conching, but also grinding and refining all together in only 8 hours compared to 72, and at a low temperature, 45 degrees Celsius, compared to about 80, 85 of the traditional system. So the process is different and is incompatible with the one of the mass market producer. If they would buy the machines, the ball mills, and put in a Forastero chocolate, they would get really a bad quality of chocolate because they wouldn't be able to get rid of the off flavor. The fourth, I would say last but not least, pillar is the commitment in sustainability. So normally the Encanto producer, I found this in all the company I'm telling in the book, all the Encanto producers are committed in sustainability. They want their employees to live better than the employees of other companies. They treat well their supplier. They are committed in the environmental sustainability, and they also are very attentive to the local environment where their company is working. And by the way, this was the reason because I accepted in 1993 to become mayor of Trieste. So we are following the principles of Peter Drucker, who I can say invented the concept of management, but also the concept of the modern company. He talked about the problem of sustainability about 80 years ago. And he really invented the idea of marketing, and he invented the concept of stakeholders, which is really the core of a company that is committed in ESG, so committed in sustainability. And so he said that one of the stakeholders of the company is the local environment, so the city or the small where the company is based. And so when they asked me, would you like to candidate as mayor, I remembered the thought by Peter Drucker, and I answered myself, that's the moment to give back something to my city, from which we got so much in our company and in our family. So let's see the keywords of Encanto quality. There is relationship, because to produce superior level of quality, you need good relationship within the company, but also outside, with your supplier, also with your competitors. Why not? I always divide the competitors in two groups, simply the good ones and the bad ones. The good ones are the ones that with us are growing the higher quality market, the niche or the part of the market, the segment of the market which is devoted to quality. If a competitor is working with us to grow this part of the market, he is a good competitor, and we will always have a friendly relationship with him. Family is another key word, because families are able to think long term, and to produce higher quality, you need some time. Coherence, a key word. If you want to produce Encanto quality, everything has to be coherent. You choose the best raw material, but then you need a special process to get the final product. Refinement, because even if we are talking of disruptive quality, you also have to be committed to the continuous improvement, so continuous refinement of your products, of your process. Perfection, we know that perfection doesn't exist for human beings, but we tend to perfection, and Encanto quality is exactly doing this. Authenticity. Often the top quality producers are companies that started many years or even centuries ago. For example, the Antinori family producing wines are working since 6 centuries. It's unbelievable. So when you talk about a wine made by Antinori, you are really talking about something authentic. Patience is another key word, because to get superior quality takes time, as we already said, and you have to be patient to wait the needed time to get the quality, the superior quality. I will make later some examples. Simplicity. Normally, the top quality is something very simple. To produce the Domori chocolate, we use a very short recipe. The recipe is very simple. We just use cocoa mass and cane sugar. That's all. We do not add cocoa butter. We do not add soy lecithin, nor vanilla or vanillin. Nothing. Just the two ingredients. Just simple. Cultivation, because you need culture, you need to study, to learn to produce Encanto quality. And finally, surprise, which is the final objective of Encanto quality, because with this excellent quality, you want to surprise your consumers. So I will make some example in the next 10 minutes, and then we will open to question and answer of some, not all of them, but some of the key words. The guy you see with the pastry that allowed him to win the European Championship of Pastry Chef is Luigi Biasetto. And he is really a guy that wants everything to be perfect. In his laboratory, everything is perfectly cleaned. All the raw material he uses are just perfect. And he keeps alive his own Mother Yeast. Instead of using chemicals as a yeast, he has this natural yeast called Mother Yeast that needs to be nourished every day. So you have to add water and wheat, but then you have to control the temperature, the level of acidity, and it's like growing a baby. But you have to do this every day, every month, every year, year after year. And he is really a perfectionist doing this. Coherence, I already talked about Domori. I told you almost everything. I can just add that the Domori production has two main lines. One is consumer, so we produce mainly chocolate bars for the final consumer. You can find them also in the internet. Chocosphere, if I remember well, is the American distributor selling online. But then we have the one you see in the picture, also the professional line. So we are serving pastry chef like Luigi Biasetto, chef chocolatier, the one producing pralines, truffles, and so on, and then gelato makers, because the most important taste in gelato is chocolate, the one that the gelato makers are selling more. Then family. So here you see a picture of the Zenia family. Remenegildo was the founder. The Zenia company has been just listed at the New York Stock Exchange, not through an IPO, but through a SPAC. So it has been incorporated in the SPAC, so now it is listed. And they produce top quality fabrics and jackets and other clothes. And they are very committed in sustainability. Imagine that the founder, Gildo Zenia, when he built the first factory and he had to cut some trees, decided to get back to the nature a much higher number of trees. And so they have a whole wood of the trees planted by their grandfather. I'm a good friend of Hermenegildo and also of his sister. So a family that gives them the possibility to think long term, also in terms of generation, and also to overcome difficult moments without changing the strategy. As it happened, for example, to us, I remember when I entered Illy Cafe, it was 1977, and a big fraud affected Brazil, killing some billion of coffee trees. And I remember that we decided to keep our quality, not to decrease the level of quality, as all the other roasters did. And we couldn't rise so much the prices because otherwise we would lost a lot of customers. So we decided to renounce to a big share of the margin. And so we made a loss this year. Fortunately, the last one I remember. Something possible for a family, because we thought, okay, we will lose some money one year, but we will recover next year, and then the life of the family is long and we will have time to grow and for staying better. And this, by the way, happened. So cultivation. Here you see Massimo Mancini and myself, when I made a visit during the summer school, we had almost one half of the time in class with teaching and also experiments, and one half of the time visiting companies. So we paid a visit to Massimo Mancini, and Mancini is producing pasta, but he grows his own wheat, and he's choosing the best varieties of wheat that allows him to produce the top quality of pasta. And he's selling also in the United States. He serves quite a lot of the best pastry chefs, especially the Michelin-starred chefs. And again, after cultivating that means growing his own wheat, he is grinding it and then mix it with the water, produce the pasta using bronze dyes that will give you a slower production of pasta, so the productivity will be lower, but you will get a pasta that will attract much more sausage. And so the pasta will be better in quality because of the variety of wheat, but also because of the quantity of sausages that it can absorb. And also the drying of the pasta is made at room temperature, not with a higher temperature, so in a shorter time, but with the time needed to get the very best quality of pasta. So room temperature dry. Then we talk about patience. What you see here is a piano by Mr. Fazioli. He is an engineer that fell in love with music, so he also plays piano, by the way. And he produces his piano using the wood that comes from the forest of Tarvisio in the mountains of the region Friuli Venezia Giulia, where the temperature are very, very low. And the lower the temperature, the slower the way of growing of the wood. And when the wood grows very slowly, it will get the best harmonic features. So if you want to have an excellent sound piano, you need to use this excellent harmonic wood. Then he produces the piano, and to produce one, it takes 2 years. So if you want to be a customer of Fazioli, you must be patient as well, because you probably will have to wait for about 2 years to get it produced. Then, as you see, he also committed in design. This model was produced, if I remember well, only last year. It's called M Liminal, and is designed by Philippe Gendre and the NYT line designer. And by the way, many piano players think that the Fazioli piano is even better than the well-known Steinway. So next surprise, and we are going to the end. What you see is a table. Is a table made by a company that is called Riva 1920, because it has been founded in 1920. And Maurizio Riva is the entrepreneur, the chairman of the company. And this table, the one you see in the picture, is made with wood coming from South Zealand, that has about 50,000 years. You understood well, 50,000 years. These trees, kauri trees, fell in the mud thousands of years ago, and the mud conserved perfectly the quality of the wood. They are the sole company authorized in New Zealand, to extract from the mud the trunk of wood, and then they bring it to Italy and they produce these unbelievable tables. And all the tables produced by Riva 1920 are made with solid wood. So they don't use other kind of tricks to produce the tables. It's just solid wood. And they have several models, one most interesting than the other. Recently, they produced tables with wood of the bricola. The bricola are the big, let's say, towers you see in Venice to limit the channels where you can pass with your boat. And they stayed for many years in the water, and they will be completely full of holes. And so every, I think, 20, 30 years, they have to change the bricola. And Maurizio Riva is buying all the used bricolas, and he brings it to his company and then cut the wood and produces these unbelievable tables full of holes. And they are made with a very strong kind of wood. Oak, it's the variety of wood. Final point, simplicity. As I told you before, the top quality, the Encanto quality products are normally simple. This is the risotto alla Milanese by Gualtiero Marchesi. He passed away a few years ago. He was a 3-starred, Michelin-starred chef in Italy. The first bringing Italy, let's say, in competition and let's say even overcoming the French chefs. And his risotto is really something very simple. It's made with rice, of course, with saffron. He also put on top a small layer of gold, but this is only for satisfy your eyes rather than your mouth or your nose. So few ingredients, but cooked in a master way. And the dish is really marvelous. I had the chance of being a friend of Gualtiero Marchesi, and I ate his dish sometimes, and I remember it really. It was amazing. And by the way, Gualtiero Marchesi was a friend of the founder of Mastroianni, the winery we acquired in Montalcino. and he also stayed for some week at the vineyard, at the winery, also staying there during the night, sleeping there, because he was writing a book. And he invented the name of the top wine by Mastroianni, which is called the Schiena d'Asino, that means back of the donkey, because he saw that the hill where the vineyard is based looks like the back of a donkey. And so he said, why don't you call the wine back of the donkey? So thank you so much for following me. Now we open for question, and I am ready to answer to you. I think we can get rid of the presentation, and here we go.
Wonderful. First of all, thank you. Thank you for that tour, which is amazing. It's fantastic. I think that there will be questions, and I'll invite people again to start asking your questions by putting them in the chat, and then we will ask you to either ask them in person or if you prefer, I can read them for you. But I will take, I will use my privilege as the moderator of this to ask you a couple of questions. And the first one is, I was fascinated by the story you told us, and it's a story that is also very much spread across this book. But a story you told us about your company, the Illy company, and the founding of that company. You talk about it being, and it is a flagship, the Illy brand is a flagship Italian brand and a brand that is recognized all over the world. And yet what you told us is also a very transnational story of how that brand came together, with your grandfather crossing and being in fact stateless, as many on that border were for a number of years between the wars, and then creating a company in Trieste. And then you also say in the book that the customers for whom you've been working and you've been targeting or thinking about have changed over the years. Your grandfather could not sell in Trieste. There was a fantastic piece of well, it's not trivia, is it? It's a piece of history that you told us. But he was mostly selling in Italy. And then your father, you say in the book, was mostly thinking about an international but European market. And then you were thinking about a global market. So I want to ask you, what is more transnational, international? What is more Italian? How does that brand, in a way, marry these two things? Being an Italian brand and an ambassador, as you say, of that concept of excellence, and yet at the same time being at its heart also an international brand from its beginning, is what you just told us.
We try to be both Italian and international. The origins are Italian. The factory is Italian. Right now, we only produce our coffee in Trieste. And by the way, only few entrepreneurs well understood that delivering goods for hundreds of kilometers cost more than delivering the same good for thousands of miles with a ship. So it wouldn't cost us less to produce also in the Americas and in Asia, because we deliver with a ship and we are on the sea. So we just bring the container to the harbor and we can put the container on the ship. And this costs us to go, for example, to New York City less than delivering the same container to Paris, which is more than 1,000 kilometers. The equal cost is around 300 kilometers. So we can reach about Verona, less than Milan, at the same cost than New York by sea. But of course, we also are international, and we are, let's say, in this moment, helped by the excellent image of the Made in Italy. That is not anymore, let's say, in fashion. We don't speak so much about Made in Italy, but I'm sure that if you go in the biggest city worldwide and you ask which are the best 10 restaurants in the city, the answer you will get will be at least 5 are Italians. And if you ask which are the best producer of furniture or the fashion sector, again, for sure, more than one half will be Italian. And this, of course, helped us. But I tell you a story when my father, that brought Illy Café to become international. He started in the Netherlands, then went to Germany, then to France, and in 1980 in the United States. And you would think he started in New York City because there were Little Italy, there were already quite a lot of Italian. No, he said, if I want to let the Illy brand become someone in the United States, I have to make sure that the Americans, not the Italians, appreciate our coffee. So he started in Scottsdale, close to Phoenix, because he said, I make sure that in this city there are almost none Italian. And if we succeed in Scottsdale, and then we went also to Portland, I remember, to San Francisco, to many other cities. But if we succeed in these cities where the Italians are not, let's say, important as part of the population, we will succeed everywhere. Then we struggled for about 20 years. So we lost money in the United States for about 20 years. But finally, we got it. And now it's our second market. And we want really to let the United States become our, let's say, home market, our second home market in the next years. And by the way, now we have a partner, which is Ron Capital, which is an American fund. And so they are also helping us to transform the United States as home market.
That is fascinating. And you've already answered another of my questions, which was precisely to what extent a target audience of Illy was ever that Italian American community or the Italian diaspora. But it's interesting how, there's that tension there. Yes, we want to succeed, but not only with the Italians, with the Americans. So it's fascinating. We have questions coming in. I will actually ask Ensa to unmute and ask her question, and then we'll carry on as they're arriving. Ensa.
Thank you so much. Mr. Illy, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. It's fascinating. I'm a big fan of Illy Café and Illy in general. We were fortunate at my university to have Andrea come speak to us a number of years ago. So I know that Illy is a very ethical and responsible company and has won many awards for this on a repeated basis. But when you described Encanto, those words didn't appear in your concept of Encanto. So in your opinion, how important are ethics and social responsibility when you talk about the concept of Encanto?
Yes, I said that it is the fourth pillar of Encanto, sustainability, and that means also social sustainability. And by the way, Illy Café, Domori are already in Italian Società Benefit, and Illy Café is already a B Corp, and Domori is going to become a B Corp. Domori acquired in 2019 a company in Great Britain called Prestat, and they produce with using the Domori chocolate, praline and truffles. It's the very first company in the world that started this production in 1902, thanks to Antoine Dufour. So he was a French guy, and he was the very first producing praline. And we are now accelerating the changes needed to become a B Corp in Prestat to allow also Domori to become a B Corp. If we wouldn't control Prestat, Domori would already be a B Corp because they have the right scores to become one. So for us, it is vital. And as I mentioned before, for the Zenia family, also in our case, it was our grandfather starting applying these principles. He always helped, for example, the employees. When an employee married, he offered him a loan to buy his house, his apartment. It was normally. And so did my father, and so are doing we all in this moment in my third generation, and so we do in the fourth generation. Andrea, you mentioned, is my younger brother. He's 9 years younger than me, and he is chairman of Illy Cafe. He and the company a few years before I became mayor. And so when I became mayor, I soon understood that it was a full-time job. And so I left the position of CEO, and I suggested to appoint Andrea. And later on, we incorporated Gruppo Illy, the family holding. I became the chairman. This happened in 2004. And I was put in charge of the diversification. So I made all the acquisition of the company that now we own through Polo del Gusto, which is the subholding for the extra coffee businesses.
I have Vito this morning waiting, but because we're talking about ethics, let me ask a little follow-on question to what Enz asked. When you talk about sustainability and you talk about the 4 pillars, I wonder, has sustainability, well, from the examples you're giving us, one of the striking things is that sustainability is not a novelty. It has been there for a long time as one of these pillars in your company, in your group, in some of the others that you're talking about, the examples that you give in the book. But do you think the importance, the relative importance of these 4 pillars has shifted over time or not? As for instance, as sustainability become more important with respect to early periods?
Yes, I agree with you. The 4th one, so sustainability, became more important recently. Before, it was more an ethical approach of the entrepreneur. But now, and many entrepreneurs didn't understand this yet, it is becoming a necessity for the market. There are not only consumers that decide not to buy products from companies that are not committed in ESG, but there are also intermediate customers. I remember, for example, Whole Foods some year ago told Illy Cafe, if you are not getting some certification of your sustainability, we will be obliged to eliminate your products from our shelves. And so we got, as first company, the certification for the sustainable supply chain, responsible supply chain to be precise. So that means that we are paying the supplier of green coffee, whatever the level of the market, a price that is covering all their costs, plus a margin, plus a premium for the quality. And we are doing the same with cocoa, with the Domori, with the tea, with the Daman Frere, which is our tea company.
Vito, you have a question for Mr. Illy.
Well, I like to compare the quality, the product of quality. I know the Italians, as you said, prefer simplicity and quality of a product. However, the quality of product, it implies a high level of ethic or even political aspects of life. It does not serve quality, high quality, does not serve the people or the population of the world. In other words, you could compare quality with the ready-made products, and the ready-made products are also economically necessary to serve the people. So what do you think about this aspect of having or producing a high quality and in a sense become an elitist kind of culture? Or Italy, I imagine, true quality may exist, but the ready-made products are really a great necessity today and in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would answer in two ways. One, saying that the number of affluent people in the world is increasing sharply in a much quicker way than the whole population. I always make the example of China. Think to China 30 years ago, there were no affluent people at all. You look at China nowadays, there are more than 150 million of affluent people, so more than in Europe, to say, and probably more than in the United States. So it is not anymore an elitist market. It's not a niche market. It is becoming even if not a mainstream market, but for sure a second stream market. Secondly, I would say, when you start a company, you have to decide in which quarter you want to stay. Will you want to play in technology, or you want to play in quality? Would you stay in the incremental, or would you stay in the disruptive method of producing technology or quality? And then the problem is being coherent. I would never say that the mass market products of the requested quality are not good, and they are absolutely necessary. But the important is, when you choose as an entrepreneur where to stay, that you stay coherent. If you made this choice, you cannot say you are the best in the world. You say you are in the average and you fulfill the needs of a large quantity of people with very reasonable prices. Then you have to consider that often Encanto quality products would cost you only few cents per day more than consuming a normal product. Just to make an example, Illy Cafe can, is true, will cost you the double than another mass market product. But you will use only, if you drink 3 cups of espresso in a day, you will use 20 grams in a day. And they will cost you maybe 10, 15 cents more than another coffee. So often the difference is absolutely affordable by, I wouldn't say everyone, but almost everyone in developed countries.
Sally, you have a question, so you can unmute yourself if you want. Yep.
Yeah. You know, I listened to the presentation with great interest, and it occurs to me that so many companies in Italy are family run. And I find it fascinating to learn the history of Riccardo Illy's grandfather and then father and then brothers. And, you know, I just wonder, I know that also in the presentation there was a big, um, uh, emphasis on family in many of the slides. And I think that's wonderful and very different from, well, maybe not so different, but, I think it's more in Italy. You find it more common that there are the Zenias and the Benettons and the Illys and so many important companies, and all of the excellencies in Italy are family run. And I wanted to ask Riccardo Illy if he felt that this comes with its positive sides, and that if he feels that that's one of the pillars, and I know he says so in the presentation, that make Italian products so excellent.
I would say yes, if the family is able to exploit the advantages of a family-run company, reducing the problem that also exists. So the main positive points are, or aspects are two: the possibility of committing in the long term. So in building a company, even in decades, even in generation. And the second one is the commitment that, especially when you bring the same name of the company, or the company brings the same name of the family, so the commitment will be really at the top level. The negative aspect is that often the following generation thinks they have some rights to become not only owners, shareholders, but also managers, and maybe also chairman or CEO of the company. And this is often a problem. And so the family needs some internal regulation. Someone told to me a kind of family bylaws, a statute, where you write the rules. We have it in our family, and we wrote the rules for the following generation to become managers, and then maybe directors, maybe chairman or CEO. And the first rule is they have to compete with the other employees. They have no rights. They have just the possibility to run, to have a competition. If they win, they will get the position. Otherwise, they don't.
So interesting. And I think that that's such an important point. And, these bylaws, if Italian companies were able to share with other countries how, this family interaction works. One of the most popular series in America right now on our television is a series called Succession. And it deals with this very problem of people, of American children, the children of the original head of the company, who believe that they have the right to succeed their father and become chairman and president of the company. And it's the interactions between them, and the bylaws were not clear. So that's a very good point. Thank you for that.
Okay, we have just a few minutes left. So if someone has a very urgent question, please let us know. As a comment on these last points, what I would say it's really interesting. Every time we talk about Italy and we talk about Italian culture, the word family is never too far away. But of course, it's a word that can be used to indicate some of the positives. And I'm really interested that Riccardo really listed the positives and negatives, because it's a word that is associated with some of the most positive aspects of what is perceived and represented as Italian culture. But also, of course, infamously in Banfield's definition of familism, it can be associated with the worst. So as always, these concepts are constructs, and also they can carry positive and negative connotations. It's been a fascinating hour and a half almost by now. It's gone very quickly. Antonio, if you can open the chat, we can post again for all of you who want to get hold of a copy of the book. I was one of the first ones to buy one. We'll post the link for those of you who are interested in reading more about this. And it's a very rich book because, as I was saying at the beginning, it is written with those business principles in mind. And at the same time, not but, and at the same time, it is so incredibly rich in history and even in anecdotes and in that personal element that makes things come alive. So again, if I were to add, I suppose, I have a quibble with one of your animals, with the cheetah, because you choose the cheetah, but then patience. I don't think cheetahs and patience go. I'm not sure. But the other word that I was thinking about as I was reading your book, and it's a book that it's a word that is in there, but in a sense, it not necessarily exactly in these terms, is the idea of commitment, of engagement. It's that question of personal engagement that has to be there for our actions to stay ethical and also to make a difference and to lead us towards that potential, that fourth level that you had outside all the existing maps, even the augmented, but then beyond that, there's the potential. So thank you again. It's been a real pleasure. We sincerely hope we can have you here in person soon. It would be an honor and a delight, enchanting indeed. Thank you to everyone who's been here. Okay, so Mary Andre is saying in the chat that the name of her apartment building is Encanto. Yes, of course. And all of us now have Encanto also in our heads for something else. Disney looms large when we think of Encanto at this particular moment, inevitably. Thanks to everybody. We will have this recording and we will make it available again I'll double check once we get off. But unless there are reasons why not, we will hopefully make this available on the website of the Center for Italian Studies here at Stony Brook. And so if you have friends and family, indeed, who weren't able to join us now, but they would love listening to this chat, this presentation, please let them know that they will be available soon. It will be available soon on our website. Thank you again. And I wish you all sort of a good afternoon here in the US, a good evening if you're in Italy, and hope to see you soon. And maybe I can ask just Sally and Riccardo to stay on for a second so we can very quickly debrief, but thank you again. And
thank you. Lovely talk.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.